Gently, not too fast.
Look, it's coming out.
You want some water too?
Small room smelled of wood smoke and the faint, lingering scent of herbs her mother used to keep sickness away. Already, she could hear the cries of her younger siblings, calling for water or breakfast, and she sighed, knowing her day had begun before the sun had fully risen. Lila was different from other children in her village. Though she wore patched clothes and carried the weight of hardship on her small shoulders, her eyes shone with curiosity, a spark of determination that would not easily be dimmed. She knew poverty well. She had grown up knowing the sting of empty stomachs, the ache of worn shoes, and the humiliation of walking miles to fetch water that never seemed enough. Yet, she dreamed. Lila dreamed of a life where her family could smile without worry, where hunger would not shadow their days, and where she could walk freely without the burden of survival pressing on her chest. By the time she reached the village well, the sun had climbed higher, and the air was thick with heat. Lila balanced 2 heavy clay pots on her small frame, each step a struggle against the weight and uneven stones beneath her feet. She moved with precision, honed by years of necessity, her mind wandering to places she had never seen but longed to explore. At school, she was often late, yet she absorbed every lesson with a hunger far beyond her classmates, imagining that the stories of kings in distant lands were whispers meant just for her. As she filled the pots with water, Lila's attention was drawn to a sudden flicker of shadow near the edge of the well. She blinked, certain it was nothing, but a whisper, soft and fleeting, brushed her ears, almost like a voice carried by the wind. Her heart thumped. "It's just the wind," she told herself. Yet the feeling lingered, an unfamiliar chill curling down her spine. Sometimes, when she was alone, she would see shadows moving where none should be, hear faint whispers that seemed too deliberate to be imagination. She never spoke of these things. Who would understand? After delivering the water to her mother and helping her younger siblings dress for school, Lila found a few stolen moments for herself. She wandered the paths beyond the village, through thick grass and the skeletal remains of old huts abandoned by time. Her curiosity often drew her here, where others feared to go. On this particular morning, her eyes caught something unusual, a hut she had never noticed before, tucked between twisted baobab trees, its roof half collapsed, the door hanging loosely on broken hinges. A pulse of excitement ran through her veins. Lila pushed the door open, the creak of old wood echoing in the still air. Dust rose in lazy clouds, motes dancing like tiny spirits in the golden sunlight. And there, resting on a broken wooden table, was a crown. It was cracked and tarnished, dull in the shadows but glinting faintly as the sunlight hit it. Its beauty was undeniable despite the wear, delicate and yet strangely commanding, as if it carried stories too heavy for the walls of the old hut. Lila's hands trembled as she reached out, brushing the crown's surface with her fingertips. It felt cold, almost alive beneath her touch. A shiver ran through her body, and for a moment, the shadows in the corners of the hut seemed to shift, drawing closer as if curious. She stepped back, heart racing, her breath catching in her throat. This was no ordinary crown. She could feel it calling to her, whispering secrets she could not yet understand. Clutching it carefully, she stepped out of the hut, hiding it beneath her worn shawl. The crown pressed against her chest, a strange weight of both promise and warning. Lila walked back toward her home, glancing over her shoulder as if the hut might vanish if she dared to look too long. Inside her, a mixture of fear and exhilaration swirled. She did not know what she had found, only that her life had shifted in the instant she laid eyes on the broken crown. The world, she felt, was about to change, and she was at the center of it. That evening, Lila sat on the worn mat in her tiny room, the broken crown resting carefully in front of her. The room was dim, lit only by a single flickering lamp that her mother had managed to keep burning through the day. She traced the intricate curves and delicate gems embedded in the crown, marveling at how something so small could feel so important, so alive. A strange hum seemed to rise from it, low and almost inaudible, like the echo of a voice she could not yet understand. Curiosity won over caution. Lila reached out, letting her fingertips graze the cold metal. The instant her skin touched the crown, a shiver ran up her arm, sharp and electric, as if the crown had recognized her. The lamp flickered violently, shadows leaping and twisting along the walls. Lila gasped, heart hammering. For a moment, the room seemed to breathe around her, expanding and contracting like it had a life of its own. Then, soft and faint, a whisper seemed to brush against her ears. "Help us." Lila froze, looking around the room. Her younger brother, Kofi, was asleep in the corner, his small chest rising and falling gently. No one else was there. She blinked, wondering if the whisper had been real or a trick of her imagination. And yet, the crown shimmered faintly, as if alive, tiny sparks of light dancing along the cracks and tarnished edges. She picked it up, cradling it like a fragile bird. The whisper came again, just for a moment. "Do not fear." Lila's heart pounded so fiercely that she could hear it in her ears. She wanted to put the crown back in the hut, to run and forget it ever existed. But even as fear gripped her, fascination rooted her to the spot. Something told her that this crown had a purpose, and that she was somehow meant to uncover it. The next few days brought strange happenings that the villagers could not explain. Pots would rattle in her small home when no wind blew. The shadows and corners seemed to stretch toward her, then vanish when she blinked. Animals that wandered near the house acted skittishly, refusing to approach. Lila's mother noticed the odd occurrences and whispered prayers over the house, worried that something unholy had taken hold. Meanwhile, whispers spread among the villagers. They began murmuring that Lila had been touched by spirits. Some shook their heads in fear. Others watched her with wide, uneasy eyes. At school, Lila could barely concentrate. Each time she placed her hands on her desk, she felt faint vibrations, as if something unseen moved beneath her fingertips. She tried to ignore it, tried to tell herself that it was only her imagination. But late at night, when she returned home and held the crown close, she saw the faintest outlines of figures in the corners of her room, shapes that vanished whenever she blinked. They were not frightening exactly, more curious, observing, as if they were testing her, measuring her resolve. One evening, as she lay in bed, the crown resting on the small table by her side, the whispers grew more persistent. The words were no longer clear, but their urgency was unmistakable. The air in her room grew colder, though no window was open, and a flickering shadow traced the outline of the crown, pulsing like a heartbeat. Lila sat up, shivering. She wanted to scream, to call her mother, to throw the crown away, but the tiny, glowing metal seemed to call to her, demanding attention. Fear and fascination battled within her. Could this be magic, or something dangerous, something beyond her understanding? She could not decide, and yet there was a thrill, a sense of destiny that tugged at her heart. Perhaps this crown had been waiting for her for a reason, as though the world itself had chosen her to unravel its secrets. That night, she whispered to the crown, "I don't know what you want from me, but I will try. I'll try to understand." The room responded with a subtle warmth, a faint glow that spread across the table and into the corners of her small home. For the first time, Lila felt a connection to something greater, though she did not yet know what. The crown was not just an object, it was a key, a mystery, and perhaps a burden she could not yet bear fully. Outside, the village was quiet, unaware of the small, tremulous magic stirring within Lila's room. Yet something had shifted. Rumors would continue to swell. The crown's faint light and whispers had already begun to reach beyond the walls of her home, touching the imaginations and fears of those who passed nearby. And in the heart of the young girl holding it, a spark had ignited, an awakening that would change everything. Lila could not sleep, her mind racing with questions. The crown had revealed its presence to her, hinting at secrets, lost voices, and a history that was waiting to be uncovered. She wondered what it would demand of her next, and whether she had the courage to face it. All she knew was this: she could not ignore it. The crown had chosen her, and in that choice, her life, and the lives of those around her, would never be the same. The night settled over the village like a thick, dark blanket, and Lila lay awake in her small room, the crown resting on the table beside her. The faint glow from its cracks illuminated the corners, revealing shadows that danced as if alive. Her heartbeat was steady at first, but then a subtle movement in the corner of a room caught her eye. A figure emerged slowly from the darkness, almost transparent, yet undeniably real. Lila's breath caught in her throat. The figure was regal, draped in flowing robes that shimmered faintly, crowned with dignity even in ghostly form. Its face was sorrowful, eyes deep pools of grief and longing. Lila's first thought was disbelief. Surely, it was a trick of the light, a reflection in her tired eyes. But the figure stepped closer, its gaze locked on her. The air grew colder, and the room seemed to shrink around her. You are real, she whispered, voice trembling. The figure inclined its head slightly, as if acknowledging her. It did not speak in words she could hear, yet a weight of sadness pressed on her chest. Then came the whispers, not clear words, but an almost musical thread of sound, urgent yet mournful. Lila realized the figure wanted something from her. Her stomach twisted with fear, but something deeper, compassion, curiosity, pulled her forward. Over the next few nights, more shapes appeared. Some were children, others adults, all clothed in garments that seemed ancient and regal. Their eyes were sad, filled with stories of betrayal and loss that spanned lifetimes. Lila began to understand that these were the souls of a forgotten royal lineage, wronged long ago, bound to the crown and unable to find peace. The spirits did not touch her, nor did they speak in the language of the living. Instead, they communicated through subtle signs: a tilted cup, a flickering shadow on the wall, a breeze that carried the faint scent of flowers that did not grow near her home. Lila learned to watch carefully, to read their silent language. Each night, she felt herself drawn deeper into their world, a world of sorrow and injustice that demanded resolution. At first, she was terrified. She would wake with her heart racing, cold sweat on her brow. The villagers noticed her distracted demeanor, whispering among themselves about strange lights in her home and the odd sounds at night. Lila felt their eyes on her, filled with suspicion, fear, and awe. And yet, she could not ignore the spirits. They were part of her now, as if fate itself had woven her life together with theirs. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the room grew dark, a spirit stepped forward more clearly than any before. Its face was stern but not unkind, eyes holding centuries of pain and wisdom. Lila felt a connection to this one, as if it were trying to tell her something crucial. She extended her hand tentatively, and though her fingers passed through the figure's form, a warmth spread through her palm, as if the spirit's energy had brushed against her very soul. Through these nightly encounters, Lila began to piece together the story. The crown had belonged to rulers whose lives had ended tragically, betrayed by those closest to them. They had been denied justice in life, and now, in death, they were bound to the broken crown, their voices unheard by the world of the living. They needed her, not to wield power, but to help them find peace, to restore what had been taken. The emotional weight pressed heavily on her. She was just a girl, poor and alone in the village, yet these ancient souls sought her courage and guidance. Fear gnawed at her heart, but a sense of destiny burned brighter. Perhaps she had been chosen because she was brave enough to face the unknown, compassionate enough to care for those who had been forgotten. The spirits expected nothing less, and somehow, she felt she could not fail them. As the nights passed, her interactions grew bolder. She left messages for the spirits in the form of small offerings, a cup of water, a flower picked from the village garden, or simply a whispered word of understanding. The crown glowed faintly each time she did, pulsing like a heartbeat, reinforcing the connection. In return, the spirit's movements became more purposeful, guiding her toward understanding, urging her to explore the past that had bound them so tightly. Fear and wonder mingled within her. Lila felt the weight of responsibility settle on her young shoulders, a heavy but sacred burden. Every shadow, every flicker of light, Every whisper that came through the crown reminded her that this was no ordinary discovery. This was a call to courage, a summons to confront history and injustice that reached beyond her own small life. And yet, for all the fear, there was hope. A hope that if she could understand the spirit's pain, if she could unravel the crown's mysteries, she might not only free them but also bring change to herself, to her family, and to the world she had always dreamed of touching. By the time the first hints of dawn crept into her room, Lila sat quietly, crown in her lap, eyes shining with both determination and fear. The spirits faded with the morning light, leaving only a faint shimmer behind, a promise that they would return. And in that quiet moment, Lila understood something profound. She was no longer just a girl struggling to survive. She was a bridge between worlds, chosen to heal wounds older than memory itself. The journey was only beginning, and the spirits were waiting. The morning sun spilled golden light across the village, but Lila Johnson felt no joy in it. Her mind was tangled with questions, thoughts of the crown and the spirits that haunted her nights. She sat on the edge of the small porch outside her home, the crown wrapped carefully in a piece of cloth beside her, and wondered how a girl like her could possibly understand centuries of sorrow and injustice. Yet, she knew she had to try. Determined, Lila began visiting the village elders, women and men whose wrinkled faces held stories older than the tallest baobab trees. She asked about the abandoned huts, the crown, and the old royal lineage that she felt was connected to the spirits. Some elders laughed softly, dismissing her curiosity as childish imagination. Others, with serious eyes, leaned closer, lowering their voices. There were rulers, one elder whispered, who were betrayed, their lives stolen, their names forgotten. Beware, child. The past does not rest easily. Lila listened carefully, taking in every word. Each story revealed a piece of the puzzle. A queen betrayed by her council, a young prince lost in the forest, a crown shattered in anger and greed. The village's accounts were fragmented, full of sorrow and warning. Yet to Lila, they felt alive, pressing her to learn more, to make sense of the spirit's pain. At home, Lila spread the note she had taken, piecing together timelines and events. Each night, the spirits returned, watching her with patient eyes. They no longer hid in corners or faded quickly. They lingered, as if approving her efforts. When she hesitated, unsure of how to connect the fragments, she felt a whisper of encouragement, subtle but clear. Seek the truth. The crown had become more than an object. It was a guide, a teacher, and a mirror reflecting the lives of those bound to it. Lila learned to interpret its faint glow, noticing that it pulsed brighter whenever she approached a clue or connected a piece of history correctly. The spirit's guidance was gentle but insistent, pushing her toward understanding while leaving the final choices to her. Her journey soon led her to the ruins at the edge of the village, crumbling stones overgrown with vines and moss. Here, she discovered carvings and inscriptions, faded by time but still legible with careful attention. They told stories of triumph and tragedy, betrayal and loss, and Lila realized that these ruins were once a palace, a place of life and laughter, now consumed by silence. As she traced the lines with her fingers, she imagined the spirits walking these halls in life, only to be cut down unfairly. A lump rose in her throat. The injustice was tangible, heavy in the air around her. Night after night, the spirits revealed more of themselves. Faces of sorrow, tears that could not fall, and silent cries filled Lila's mind. She began to understand the depth of their suffering, and it mirrored her own struggles in ways she could never have expected. She had felt powerless in her small life, burdened by poverty and responsibility. Yet here she was, holding the hopes of centuries in her hands. Fear and doubt crept in. How could she, a single girl, help spirits trapped by betrayal and injustice? Yet, courage grew alongside doubt. Lila discovered that understanding alone was not enough. She would need to act. She would need to face dangers she could not yet imagine, confront forces both living and dead, and risk herself to free the spirits. She learned patience, observation, and empathy, seeing that every gesture, every whispered word, and every small act mattered in ways she had never realized. Some nights were darker than others. Shadows seemed to press closer, and strange sounds whispered through the cracks in her walls. The spirit's sorrow was heavy, and occasionally she felt it as a physical weight on her chest. But even in these moments, there was guidance, an invisible hand pushing her to keep moving forward. She learned to trust her instincts, to listen to the crown, and to believe in the connection that had been forged between her and these ancient souls. Through research, observation, and quiet reflection, Lila began to see the full picture. The crown was a symbol of the injustices that had silenced the spirits, but it was also a key to restoration. They had been wronged, yes, but they had not been forgotten. And she, Lila Johnson, had been chosen to bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Every night, the spirit's eyes, filled with sorrow yet trust, reminded her of the responsibility she carried. By the end of the week, Lila understood that her journey was only beginning. Knowledge had opened doors, but courage would be required to walk through them. She gathered her notes and clutched the crown close, feeling the pulse of energy that thrummed in its metal and gems. Somewhere deep inside, she knew the next steps would test her like never before. But for the first time, Lila felt a glimmer of confidence. She was not alone. The spirits were with her, guiding, watching, and waiting for her to take action. And as she looked toward the horizon, where the sun dipped low, painting the village in warm hues of orange and gold, Lila made a silent promise. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. She would honor the spirit's pain, restore what had been lost, and face whatever shadows awaited her. Her life, and theirs, would not remain the same. The village had grown quieter over the past few days. Even the usual chatter of children playing in the dusty streets seemed muted, as if some invisible weight had settled over the homes and huts. Lila Johnson knew the crown's power was stirring more than just whispers. It was drawing attention she could not ignore. One evening, as she returned from the ruins, clutching her notes and the crown wrapped in her shawl, she noticed a figure standing near her home. It was a man she had never seen before, tall and imposing, with eyes that burned with a sharp, calculating gaze. His presence alone made her stomach knot with unease. Something about him radiated authority and danger, and instinctively, she knew he was no ordinary villager. "You have something that does not belong to you," the man said, his voice low but firm, carrying a weight that seemed to echo in the narrow alleyways. Lila clutched the crown tighter, pressing it against her chest. I don't understand," she whispered. "You will," he said, stepping closer. "That crown belongs to my family. It is mine by right. Give it to me, and no one will be harmed. Refuse, and your world will burn." Fear surged through Lila, freezing her for a moment. Her first instinct was to run, to hide the crown, to protect herself and her family. Yet she remembered the spirits, their sorrowful eyes, their trust, their hope resting in her hands. How could she betray them after all she had learned? The man's eyes narrowed. "You do not know what you hold. Power like this, it changes everything. You cannot control it. It belongs to me, and I will take it." His words carried a chilling certainty. Lila realized this was no ordinary confrontation. This was the first real test of her courage, the first obstacle that would demand more than curiosity or kindness. It demanded bravery. Over the next few nights, the man's presence grew more menacing. He appeared near the ruins, at the village well, even in the shadows of her room. Lila could feel the tension pressing against her, trying to break her resolve. The spirits were restless too, moving anxiously, their faint whispers filled with warning. Lila began to understand that the crown's power was a magnet, not just for the lost souls she sought to help, but for those who would misuse it. One evening, she awoke to find the crown glowing brighter than ever. Shadows stretched across the walls like claws. The man's voice seemed to echo through the room, though he was nowhere to be seen. "Give it to me, girl, or face the consequences." Lila's heart raced, fear gnawing at her chest, but she refused to move toward surrender. She whispered softly to the crown, feeling its warmth pulse through her hands. "I will protect them. I will not let you take this." The nights became a battle of wills. Lila faced illusions, rooms shifting unnaturally, shadows taking form she could barely comprehend, whispers that seemed to taunt her deepest insecurities. Each time, she felt the spirit's presence, guiding her, lending courage. She realized that the crown amplified the strength and fears of both the living and the dead. Every step, every decision had consequences she could not yet fully see. Fear and doubt tried to break her. She imagined the destruction the man could bring, the harm to her mother and siblings, the chaos that might spread through the village. And yet, amidst that fear, she found clarity. She had a choice. She could submit, or she could stand. And standing meant more than physical courage. It meant embracing responsibility for something far greater than herself. The man's threats escalated. He set traps near the ruins, trying to scare her away. One night, she narrowly avoided a collapsing wall of stones, feeling the echo of his presence in every step she took. She realized he would not relent. To protect the spirits and herself, she would need not only courage, but cleverness and resourcefulness. Through it all, the spirits remained her silent allies. They whispered guidance in shadows, nudged objects to warn her, and sometimes, for brief moments, allowed her to see flashes of the past, the injustices that bound them, the pain inflicted by greed and betrayal. Lila understood that the antagonist was not just seeking the crown's physical power, but the opportunity to exploit the suffering of souls trapped in despair. For the first time, Lila grasped the depth of what she had undertaken. This journey was not just about curiosity or discovery. It was about confronting darkness, both human and supernatural, and refusing to let it dominate the world. Each night, when she held the crown close and felt its faint glow, she promised herself she would not falter. She would protect the spirits, uncover the truth, and confront the shadow that threatened them all. As dawn broke one morning, she stood at the edge of the village, gaze steady, crown in hand, knowing the trials were far from over. The man would return, stronger and more cunning, but so would her resolve. Lila was no longer just a frightened girl. She was a guardian, a bridge between the living and the dead, and the stakes had never been higher. The path ahead was uncertain and dangerous, but for the first time, Lila felt the full weight and the full meaning of her destiny. The crown, the spirits, the shadows, and even the antagonist were threads in a story she was determined to see through, no matter the cost. Night had fallen like a thick curtain over the village, swallowing every sound and shadow. Lila Johnson stood at the edge of the old ruins, clutching the broken crown in her hands. Her heart raced, not with fear alone, but with the weight of responsibility pressing down upon her. The antagonist, the man who had stalked her steps and threatened her family, lurked somewhere in the darkness. She could feel his presence like a cold wind cutting through her soul. The spirits were near too, forming ghostly shapes that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Their eyes, filled with centuries of grief, focused on her with a mixture of hope and urgency. Lila felt the crown pulse, warm and alive against her chest, as if urging her forward. Tonight, there would be no turning back. The truth she had uncovered, the lessons she had learned, and the courage she had nurtured were about to be tested in a way she could never have imagined. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the ruins. The man emerged, his face a mask of greed and determination. "Give me the crown, girl," he barked, his voice sharp and full of menace. "It belongs to me. Step aside, or your family suffers." Lila's hands trembled, but she did not yield. She took a deep breath, feeling the spirit's presence around her, a chorus of silent encouragement. "I will not let you take it," she said, voice steady despite the fear coiling in her chest. "This crown is not for power or greed. It is for justice, for those who cannot speak for themselves." The man lunged, and for a moment, the night seemed to shiver. Shadows twisted unnaturally, wind gusted through the ruins, and the crown began to glow brighter, almost painfully so. Lila closed her eyes, centering herself, letting every lesson, every story, every whisper of guidance from the spirits wash over her. She felt their sorrow, their longing, their trust in her, and it strengthened her. A sudden clarity struck her. The crown's restoration was not about fighting the man with force alone. It was about forgiveness, understanding, and freeing the spirits who had been trapped for centuries. Lila opened her eyes and raised the crown high. "I forgive you," she whispered, not to the man, but to the spirits, to the injustices that had bound them, to the pain and betrayal of centuries past. "You are free." The air vibrated with a low hum. Shadows stretched, twisted, then recoiled as a warm, golden light erupted from the crown. The spirits, once pale and sorrowful, now shone with radiant clarity. Their forms solidified, not to harm, but to celebrate their liberation. The anguish that had haunted them for generations melted away like mist under the morning sun. Lila felt tears roll down her cheeks as she realized the enormity of what she had done. The antagonist staggered back, blinded by the light, unable to comprehend the transformation unfolding before him. The crown no longer held a simple mystical power. It had become a beacon of justice, of courage, of love restored. The spirits surrounded Lila, their eyes filled with gratitude. One by one, they began to fade, leaving behind a sense of peace that settled over the ruins like a gentle blanket. For the first time in her life, Lila felt the weight lift from her shoulders. She had faced fear, confronted greed, and embraced a responsibility far greater than she had ever imagined. She realized that true power was not in controlling others or seeking revenge. It was in understanding, in courage, and in the willingness to act for the greater good. The man, now alone in the ruins, looked around in confusion. The crown's glow faded to a gentle warmth in Lila's hands, its purpose fulfilled. He could not take what had been earned through empathy and bravery. Lila felt no anger toward him, only a deep, steady confidence. He was a shadow that had tested her, but he could not dim the light she had discovered within herself. The night grew calm again. Lila stood in the ruins, the crown cradled like a fragile treasure. The spirits were gone, their freedom secured, yet their presence lingered in her heart. She could feel their lessons, their guidance, their love embedded in every beat of her heart. Lila knew that she had changed. Her fear, her doubt, her insecurity had been replaced with courage, clarity, and an unshakable sense of purpose. As dawn's first rays broke over the horizon, painting the ruins in warm hues of orange and gold, Lila lowered the crown gently to the ground. She whispered a final farewell to the spirits, a promise that their legacy would live on in her actions and in the stories she would tell. She turned toward the village, her steps sure and her heart light. The journey had been perilous, but it had transformed her in ways she could never have imagined. The crown, once broken and burdened with sorrow, now rested peacefully, a symbol not of power, but of redemption, courage, and hope. And Lila Johnson, the brave girl who had dared to listen, to care, and to act, walked forward with the knowledge that even in a world shadowed by fear and injustice, one heart guided by courage could light the way for many. The village awakened to the soft glow of morning, golden light spilling over the rooftops and fields. Lila Johnson stepped lightly along the dusty paths, the crown carefully wrapped in a cloth and set aside for safekeeping. The air felt different, lighter, warmer, filled with the promise of new beginnings. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free, unburdened by fear or doubt, her heart echoing the peace she had helped restore to the spirits. Her mother met her at the small hut, eyes wide with relief and concern. "Lila, are you all right?" she asked, noticing the calm confidence in her daughter's gaze. Lila smiled softly, brushing dirt from her worn clothes. "I'm okay, Mama. Everything's okay now," she said, though she knew that life would not be without its challenges. But somehow, the weight of those challenges felt lighter. Courage had taken root in her heart, replacing the anxiety and uncertainty that had long shadowed her steps. The villagers, too, seemed to sense the change. Whispers of the girl who had been touched by spirits shifted from fear to awe and respect. Children peeked curiously from behind doors, and elders nodded knowingly as Lila passed. Though she did not fully understand the magic that had freed the spirits, She could feel the invisible threads of their gratitude woven into the world around her. The air seemed clearer, the winds gentler, and even the ruins at the edge of the village radiated a quiet dignity that had not been there before. Lila's days took on a new rhythm. She helped her mother and younger siblings, but there was a steadiness in her step now, a calm assurance that had not been there before. She returned to school more often, learning with a sharper focus, understanding that knowledge and curiosity could shape her life as much as courage and kindness had. The crown, once broken and heavy with sorrow, had become a symbol of hope, reminding her of the spirit she had freed and the strength she carried within. At night, Lila sometimes felt a gentle warmth brushing against her, subtle and comforting, as though the spirits were nearby still, benevolent and watchful. She no longer feared the shadows or the whispers, for they were no longer signs of unrest but reminders of courage, empathy, and the responsibility she had embraced. The lessons she had learned, the value of understanding, the power of forgiveness, the strength in standing for what is right, were now etched into her heart. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the village in shades of orange and gold, Lila stood at the edge of the old ruins. She looked at the crown resting on the table before her, the faint glow of its magic reflecting the journey she had undergone. "Thank you," she whispered softly, not to the crown itself, but to the spirits who had trusted her, guided her, and allowed her to change their fate. She felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, a knowledge that she had played her part in restoring justice and peace. Her dreams shifted too. No longer were they limited to the small village and its hardships. She imagined a future where she could help others, where courage and kindness could be shared beyond her home. She envisioned a life filled with purpose, where the lessons of the spirits, empathy, responsibility, and inner strength would guide her decisions and actions. She realized that freedom, for both herself and others, began with understanding and grew through courage. As Lila returned to her home, she noticed the little things, the laughter of children, the smiles of villagers, the gentle sway of trees in the evening breeze. Everything felt alive, imbued with the quiet magic of hope and renewal. She knew that challenges would come again, that darkness and uncertainty were inevitable in life. But she also knew she had the strength to face them, the wisdom to act with compassion, and the courage to protect what mattered most. And so, Lila Johnson, the girl who had once struggled under the weight of poverty and fear, now walked with purpose and confidence. The broken crown, now a symbol of courage and justice, rested safely, a reminder of the spirit she had freed and the lessons they had imparted. The village, too, seemed transformed, not by magic alone, but by the courage and kindness of one small girl who dared to believe in hope, stand against fear, and embrace the unknown. As night fell over the village, Lila lay in bed, eyes open to the sky, the faint glow of stars mirrored in her own. She whispered a final promise to herself, to live with courage, to carry the wisdom she had gained, and to honor the legacy of those who had come before. With a heart full of hope and dreams stretching beyond the horizon, she closed her eyes, ready for a future shaped by bravery, compassion, and the knowledge that one person's courage could indeed change the world.